Yeah, welcome to American Jew After Dark.
Oh,
I guess,
hey,
right?
we're filming at nighttime. We're bringing in the Shabbat over here.
I know, it's our first time recording the podcast on Shabbat. I feel pretty great about it.
Is it? Did we never record even back in the day?
Not like after sundown.
Oh, okay, so hey, it's our first Shabbat. Good Shabbos, Jordan.
Yes, a good Shabbos to you. We didn't even get a Shabbos goy to come and turn the equipment on.
I know, we did it ourselves. We're our own Shabbos goys. I never liked that whole Shabbos goy thing. I think I talked about this, when we used to do American Jew, how like we had a housekeeper growing up, and my neighbors used to be like, hey, can we borrow your housekeeper? And it always like pissed me off so bad. Like, no, you can't borrow her. Or like, okay, but you got to pay for her next hour. No, but I always didn't like it. Like she was just like some possession to like lend out, to like turn on the light for them or whatever. It's just like, and if you're like asking someone to turn the light, like just fucking do it yourself. That's what I feel about it.
I don't know. I think it is kind of funny that you're not even supposed to ask for it outright. You're supposed to really like hint at it and like
Right?
encourage people to come to their own idea. Oh, let me help you.
It's so dark and I can't see anything. How am I supposed to enjoy this gefilte fish in the dark?
Oh boy. Well, I don't know. I think the concept of the goy, it's interesting. We're going to talk about Dave Chappelle and Ari Shaffir. You know comedian Ari Shaffir as well, right?
Of course,
Yeah.
Ari Shaffir is like a really great dude.
Really
I gotta
good
say.
dude.
He's a really nice guy, funny comedian. But I feel like a lot of comedians, when they have success, a lot of them become a little dickish. But Ari's a guy. He's a real like comics comic. He cares about comedians. He wants to lift other comedians up. He wants to help other comedians. He supports and encourages other comedians. He's a real mensch.
He's a menschy dude. I like him. I think he's very funny. I think he's got a lot of his material is controversial. He does a lot of hot button issues. He pushes the envelope, and I think that's really what great comedy is to start having conversations about tougher topics. He was talking about in his new.
So he has a new special out.
He has a new special out called Jew.
Hey.
And it is all about having a conversation about Judaism from an American perspective on how some of the traditions and some of the stuff that more people that are more religious than he is now, how ridiculous he finds it. And he was talking about how it's weird that, Jews always cry anti-Semitism, but when you think about it, like the Orthodox Jews, they are some of the most judgmental people. I think we've talked about this before.
Absolutely.
And he said that, like, it's funny that goy is actually a derogatory term that refers to everybody except Jews. And it's kind of like it's the most inclusive slur in the world.
Okay, is that one? That's the line from his act?
Yeah, I kind of find it funny.
I haven't watched the special yet, but it's definitely something I'm interested in checking out.
I think it's really interesting that this special came out around the same time that we're always having these conversations about anti-Semitism.
Yeah, anti-Semitism has been going on, for hundreds and hundreds of years.
Yeah.
There's always different forms of it. A lot of the same anti-Semitic tropes just keep on coming back and back. Kind of like what's happening now with the whole dumb Kanye thing.
Well, so the Kanye thing, so Chappelle hosted SNL this past weekend, and apparently a lot of people are all up in arms about his set. Now, first of all, I love Dave Chappelle. Did you watch his set?
I love Dave Chappelle, and I loved his set. I think it was absolutely incredible. I don't understand why people are upset, but that's kind of like what you mentioned before. A lot of Jews are looking for anti-Semitism, just like a lot of non-Jews are looking to blame the Jews and cause anti-Semitism. It's kind of like a hard thing because I feel like so many Jews are so quick. I like to call it the boy who cried anti-Semitism was what I like to say, to be like anti-Semitic when it isn't anti-Semitic. But there is enough anti-Semitic things that when people do that, it only hurts us. It makes people not take anti-Semitism seriously when it's for real. So I hate it. Dave Chappelle was amazing. First of all, I think he's the greatest comic of all time.
I think, I agree.
I love him. I love his cadence. I love what he talks about. I love his style. I love his voice. I love his jokes. I think he's so amazing. He hosted Saturday Night Live. Apparently, he was very concerned with, his monologue, where in the dress rehearsal, he did a completely different monologue because he didn't want anyone to cut any of the great jokes he did.
Hold on. Do you think he did an entirely different monologue, or he just didn't do all of those jokes about the Jews?
From what I understand, he did an entirely different monologue.
Which is fucking amazing to think that Chappelle did a half an hour of brand new stand-up comedy on Saturday.
Oh, I mean, he goes and pops in clubs and does like 4 or 5 hours.
I know, but like,
I mean, he's amazing. People just want to hear him talk. I know Chappelle himself likes to tell this story about, I guess he was talking with some older comedian once when he was getting started, and he said, it's okay if you're not funny as long as you're interesting. And I think Chappelle is always interesting.
Also, I'll tell you, this is a funny story, and I'm sure I've told you this story before, but the first Chappelle story I ever heard, my roommate Alex, my friend Alex,
okay,
who I was friends with for 20 years, he had been a pot dealer at one point, and he used to tell this story about how he used to sell pot to Dave Chappelle. And one day,
a lot of people sold pot to Dave Chappelle.
Right, but this story is a story about my friend Alex selling pot to Dave Chappelle. So Dave came over to his house to buy pot.
Okay.
They got stoned, and they were hanging out. My buddy Alex had to jump in the shower. He jumped in the shower. While he was in the shower, Dave knocked on the door, said, "Hey, man, I got to go. But make sure you watch Letterman tonight. I wrote a joke about your fish tank." And he went and did Letterman that night, and he did a joke on Letterman that night that he had written on Alex's couch. And that blows me away as well, because those kinds of late night sets are vetted and run to death, especially 20 years ago when Chappelle was not Chappelle. He was not the brand that he is now, not the name that he is now. To think that he was already at that level where he could write a joke and do it on Letterman that night always blew me away. Like, that is amazing.
Well, yeah, I mean, that's the kind of comedian he is, where he will take risks like that, where a lot of comics wouldn't, and they want to kind of play it safe and do only like what's been approved or whatever. But Chappelle is a comic that'll go and do something different, do something new, say what he wants to say, not what the people want him to say. And I think that's one reason why people love Chappelle so much. Certainly one of the reasons why I love him. And he's a brilliant artist, one of the best artists we have in contemporary America, in my opinion.
I totally agree. I thought his speech that he gave at his high school. Did you see that speech?
I did watch that too.
I mean, he's just so present, and so I think he's I think he's a genius. I always get sick when people cry foul about some of these sets on SNL. When you book a comedian to host SNL, those are the best monologues, because they wrote that's what they do. When
I woke up Sunday morning, the first thing I did was watch his monologue, and I thought it was great. And then I was hearing, all this stuff that people were saying is anti-Semitic or whatever, and I was like, what?
Yeah.
I loved it. I thought it wasn't anti-Semitic. I think it was like doing the opposite of being anti-Semitic. It was like, explaining to the world a little bit more about the Jews and having some kind of ownership for the Jews of the reality of the situation. But then, of course, after everyone was crying anti-Semitism, I watched it again, and I still think it's incredible, and it's not anti-Semitic. And if you call it anti-Semitic, you have no concept of nuance, and you're the problem. If you're calling what Chappelle did anti-Semitic, you're the problem, not what he said. Because the truth is, there are a lot of Jews in media.
Yeah.
There are a lot of Jews in banking. So, like he said, hey, there are a lot of black people in Ferguson, Missouri. Doesn't mean we control the place. Exactly. But to say that there aren't a lot of Jews is just being in denial and not admitting the facts. And like, how could we not expect people to be anti-Semitic or to think down on us when we won't even admit to the most obvious true thing? Like, we have to own it a little bit. We have to say, hey, there are a lot of us in this business, Hey, there are a lot of black people in the NBA. It happens. There are a lot of Christian presidents. In fact, all of them have only been Christian. So it's like, that's just the truth and the reality. So producers be like, oh, but he said a lot of Jews. Yeah, there are a lot of Jews in show business.
Listen, I think Chappelle hit it really right on the head. I think he really knocked it out of the park. But I want to go back to what I was saying before. Like, I really just get sick when people cry about when they get when Chris Rock hosted, when Bill Burr hosted. They have these comedians that push the envelope a little bit, come on SNL. People are like, oh my God, I can't believe what he said. Well, no shit. That's who you booked for the show. You book Dave Chappelle, you get Dave Chappelle. That's what you expect. I think that I thought he was, again, I watched it a second time today again, and I thought it was still just as funny. I laughed again. I thought, like, already knowing some of the jokes, I still laughed again. I thought, and I also watched Jon Stewart was on Colbert, and Jon Stewart, I guess,
I love Jon Stewart.
I love Jon Stewart.
Great guy.
And
he has some of the beliefs as we have. People call him anti-Semitic as well because he doesn't care for the way Israel treats the Palestinian people, which doesn't make you anti-Semitic. It makes you human.
He actually said that on Colbert, that like people call him anti-Semitic for saying that he disagrees with Israel's treatment of Palestinians.
It's unbelievable.
But he said something really interesting that I think is kind of the thing that we talk about on the show a lot, and I think that it's a healthy thing that's coming out of this the Chappelle backlash, and I think that it's really central to what Chappelle was trying to talk about, which is that these are difficult issues. Why do we sweep them under the rug? Why can't we talk about them openly? Why is it so scary to talk about this shit? But the fact that he is talking about it, people are talking about it in a more constructive way, I hope. I mean, we talked about this last week about how there are so many anti-Semites who have never fucking met a Jew. Like, this is a thing where it's hopefully going to lead to more discussion, more people sitting at the table, more people wanting to learn about some of this stuff and not just going back to whatever, bubble of information that we normally go to.
I think that's one of the problems.
I mean,
because I want to agree with you on that, but I think a lot of people did watch Chappelle and his monologue and think, you see, Kanye's right. That's the attitude that they have. They didn't take from it what like you and I took for that. And then like we said, on the other side, there are all these Jews being like, he's anti-Semitic. And then everyone is saying, oh, you see, you can't say anything without the Jews crying anti-Semitism or wanting now to cancel Dave. And, so we're still getting it from both sides.
Yeah.
So I want to believe, I think he hopefully did open up and start some conversations. But, obviously there is a huge disconnect between the black and the Jewish community. I know we want to talk about some of the conspiracy theories involving Jews when it came to the slave trade.
Well, before we get to that, I just want to say I think the thing that Jon Stewart also said that I think is something that we have talked about. Like, it is important to create some of these discussions, because if you just start starting to label people as this or that, anti-Semitic, that just ends the discussion. There's no debate there. You're not open to listening to the other side when you flatly, just decry anti-Semitism every time somebody says something.
It's true, but I think the point that I was trying to get to was that we're not, that a lot of this stuff. Louis Farrakhan, he wrote a book. A lot of people said that it's one of the most hateful literature ever written, where he talks about the blacks and the Jews, and I feel like the black community, they kind of what their perception is, it isn't good of the Jewish people. They definitely don't understand how we have like what they perceive as positive stereotypes. Then why we have a problem with that? And that's why there's like part of this disconnect, I think, between these communities, that then when, someone like a basketball player or Kanye leans into it, so many people are quick to like jump on that bandwagon, when in reality, like, we should be having more each other's backs. Like I mentioned on a previous episode too, like, they want us at each other's throats. Mm-hmm. White supremacy wants the black and Jewish communities to be at odds.
I know it's difficult to figure out where the common ground is so that both sides can come to the table and have discussions about it without screaming and pointing fingers. I think is part of the issue. I mean, you have guys like Kanye that have such these great following. I mean, people are listening to the things. There was vandalism in a church, a synagogue, in a Jewish cemetery, where they defaced the Jewish cemetery. All these Jewish
in Chicago, they drew swastikas on like something like over 20 different headstones at a Jewish cemetery.
Awful. And they wrote Kanye was right, spelled R-I-T-E.
Yeah, you're an idiot when even you can't spell anti-Semitism right and you're spelling it wrong. There's some cute girl outside. She's waving at us right now.
I'll tell you this. I think it's, not only did they spell right wrong, that's a very, a huge blow to the American education system, but an even bigger blow.
Is it though? It's not really. It's kind of the reality of the American education system. Well, but those are the people that are anti-Semitic. They're uneducated. They're not smart. They can't even spell a single word right. They can't even spell right, which is really sad. And also, they're defacing, this cemetery. They don't know who these Jewish people were. They don't know what their jobs were. They don't know what their involvement was in media, in banking, if they were Holocaust survivors. They don't know nothing. They are just jumping on this idiot Kanye's bandwagon and extending this hatred. And that's why what he said is so dangerous. And that's why it's unfortunate that people aren't understanding the nuance and the brilliance of Dave Chappelle's monologue and how it's different from what Kanye West said, from what Kyrie Irving, whatever the fuck his name is, has said, and what so many anti-Semitic people have said throughout history.
I think also, the thing is that the thing that troubles me the most, I think, especially in regards to the American education system, is that these kids are too stupid to even know who Hitler is. That's apparently, the phrase is Hitler was right, not Kanye was right.
Oh, wow.
I mean,
okay. I didn't even put that together, but I mean.
I thought it was bad.
Is that what they were going for, you think?
I thought it was bad when kids watching the VMAs were like, who's this Paul McCartney guy? He's going to blow up because of Kanye. Like now it's,
wow.
Well,
I mean, I'm not a fan of Kanye. I'm not a fan of idiot kids who are defacing Jewish cemeteries. Like, that just shows, like, a total disregard for, like, fucking decency. Like, dead people, you're going to go and, like ruin dead people's freaking, like, their headstones. You're going to paint swastika Nazi, like, imagery because they're Jewish? Because, what, like, you think this is fun or hilarious? Or, like, what statement are you making? Like, nothing. You're just an idiot who thinks right is spelled R-I-T-E.
Yeah, I mean, it's hard to figure out. That's the thing. Like, there's so much of this stuff that's really hard to deal with, and people who make jokes about it that try to find ways to bridge the gap, to find some community, are also being attacked for it. So it's like, where can you find a place where you're able to, deal with this stuff as a human being and not just as like a statistic or as like a, part of the that's why I love comedy. Comedy's like the only place where you're allowed to have strong opinions. I feel like Chappelle's maybe one of the last guys that doesn't have, he said he didn't get a sneaker deal because he didn't want to have to worry.
No, he said he didn't want a sneaker
deal. Want a sneaker deal because he didn't want to have to worry about having.
I feel like he should have a sneaker deal with Converse.
Yeah, I'm just saying, a lot of these people, there's no canceling people. You can take away their revenue or whatever, but in comedy, people. You have ideas people want to listen to, you'll get up, you'll find an audience, you'll find it doesn't have to be NBC all the time.
Well, I mean, that's yes, and unfortunately that is the way the world works, especially with hatred, that there are plenty of places where you can't spread hatred, but they find other places to do so. There are neo-Nazis, there are white supremacists, there are bigots of all shapes and colors that find ways to share their hate, and it's very unfortunate.
I mean, the funny thing is that if you think about it, when you're writing a stand-up comedy bit, like the premise itself is usually some sort of conspiracy theory that we're just, coming up with ourselves to explain something in our lives. Do you like that segue that I'm going?
Well, I mean, before we I just think that, like, while of course we hope that people will be less anti-Semitic and people will be open more to learning stuff instead of making quick judgments, I think that there's also something that the Jewish community needs to not be so quick to rush to cry anti-Semitism and needs to be more open to, communicating and creating a dialogue and educating people, not just being so quick to, brand them as a Jew hater.
For sure. I mean, I think it also just goes back to the fact that the Jews do tend to be very secular. We don't often sit at other people's dinner tables. We don't often have, when you get to the ultra-Orthodox, or to, ultra-religious groups, they're not sitting down with people from other religions and other groups with the frequency. So I think it's important that we all have an open mind about that we try to find less ways to have the goy moniker be a derogatory term.
Yeah, I mean, I don't like using the word goy. I prefer shiksas, especially for my dating. I'm just joking.
A little bit more specific.
Right?
Yeah.
Well, another conspiracy theory, another anti-Semitic.
Women don't want to sleep with you because you're Jewish.
No. But that's unfortunate, is that people want to say that the Jews were, like, dominated the Atlantic slave trade, which isn't true, by the way. Plenty of scholars have pointed out how this is false information. First of all, there's plenty of books about the slave trade that doesn't even talk at all about Jews, which I guess is why people say, like, you see, the Jews are trying to keep it out of the books. Where no, it's just because we had such a small part of it that it wasn't worth including in those books. People want to be like, oh, no, it was the Jews. Like, yes, there were Jews that owned slaves, especially a lot of Sephardic Jews that went to Brazil. There were a bunch that were involved in owning slaves, and maybe even some involved in, the slave trade. But not like more. We weren't dominating the slave trade. And unfortunately, there was everybody in the slave trade. Black people were involved in the slave trade as well. Both other African tribes that would kidnap other African tribes and then sell them, and both emancipated slaves that then would own slaves later. Dave Chappelle actually talks about this in one of his specials, how there was one, he got emancipated, then he owned slaves, and he was the nastiest to all his slaves. So this is another example of people trying to blame shit on the Jews, and they want to use the Jews as a scapegoat. And this has happened throughout history, and it happened with this, where Spain was unhappy with the Portuguese and leaving and going to Brazil, and they started blaming that on the Jews. Just like during the Russian Revolution, they were unhappy with, they thought the Jews were causing the revolution. That's when the protocols of the Elders of Zion started getting spread around, and they started, wanting people to hate on the Jews. When in doubt, blame the Jews. It's an ongoing thing.
It does seem to be somewhat of a historical refrain. People do find the Jews to be an easy scapegoat because, like we say this all the time. I mean, it's like we've gone out of our way to sort of separate ourselves from to keep to ourselves essentially.
Yeah, I mean,
we don't go around the world trying to convert people. We don't go around the world like letting people know that we're the chosen people. I guess we do kind of go around telling people that we're the chosen people, but I don't know.
I mean, the Bible tells the people, I guess. I'll do a lot of Jews run around like, hey, you want to put on tefillin? Oh, you're not chosen? Go to hell. I think it's unfortunate that people, especially now, I feel like with, all this stuff that's happening to the black community, and I feel like they are kind of like building this type of animosity towards Jewish people that is, coming to the surface because of Kanye and Kyrie and, people misinterpreting what Dave Chappelle was saying, or just taking what they want from Chappelle's monologue instead of like truly understanding it, just being like looking for reasons to hate for the Jews. Because if you go in watching the monologue that way, sure, you're going to find things.
Well, that happens with any stand-up set. If you take the jokes out of context, you can find something to be offensive about. I mean, that's why comedy is great, because we find something that is a little bit of an issue, or a hot-button issue, or a controversial opinion, and you take away, find a way to bring, I think it's Carlin. I think Carlin said the job of the comedian is to find the line, intentionally cross it, and bring the audience with you. That's what.
Hey, he was one of the best. Can't argue with that. So, of course, there's always been these rumors about Jews' involvement in the slave trade. And then I guess they really kind of popped off when, Louis Farrakhan, he started talking about it a lot. He wrote a book, Other Leaders of, the Nation of Islam. David Duke, a former Ku Klux Klan Grand Wizard. If you go to YouTube and you search it, there's all this bullshit, mostly by their supporters. But, like I said, most scholars, they all think this is just like bullshit, Unfortunately, they want to jump to anti-Semitism instead of just saying it's bullshit. But it does, I see how it bleeds and becomes anti-Semitism.
I think it's important to be aware and be honest about your histories, and I think it's such a weird thing that people go out of their way to focus on, blow something like that up to a point where it takes it out of the context of the larger the historical context. Just because there were Jews who owned slaves doesn't mean the Jews ran the slave trade.
There were some Jews that owned slaves. Everybody owned slaves.
Yeah.
So they're Jews, It's crazy to say that, the Jews were the ones that, really, made the slave trade a thing. That didn't happen. That wasn't the case. And actually, aside from, it was so small.
I mean, I think it's just always ridiculous to me that people go out of their way to be like, oh my God, the Jews run the country. The Jewish cabal. We've never had a single Jewish president. If you look at the Forbes top 10 most richest people in the world, there's only 2 Jews on there. There's not a lot of.
Hey, the Jews are responsible for crucifying Jesus, for resisting God's word. We manipulated kings and world markets. We drank the blood of Christian children. And of course the Jews are responsible for capitalism or whatever. Communist revolutions. It's always eager to blame the Jews because we are an easy scapegoat, I guess. You see people fall in line. Kanye says one thing, people are going to Jewish cemeteries and painting swastikas because for some reason it's like people want to hate on the Jews. People
want to find a way to antagonize. I don't know. I don't know exactly why there's so much hatred, that doesn't seem tethered to any action, or any like movement. It's just like people going around just like yelling, Jew, you dirty Jew. Like what? For what reason? For what purpose?
Why? I just showered yesterday. What are you talking about, dirty Jew?
I'm just saying, I feel like, there's so many instances that we've talked about on this show of things like that aren't connected to any larger ideology other than the fact that, we hate the Jews.
It's just like an easy place to go.
I guess.
When in doubt, blame the Jews. When in doubt, hate the Jews. Something's wrong. Silly Jews. But that's not true. I hope that we could raise more awareness. We could have the conversation where people could understand more that some of these conspiracy theories are bullshit. They're riddled in hatred. They're just other examples that have happened already time and time again throughout history of people trying to, make the Jews look bad, pass the buck, to the Jews, no pun intended. And it's ridiculous and it's horrible and it's not true.
You said
so.
No.
We want to talk. We want to keep the conversation going. And we hope that if you have questions, if you have comments, you'll hit us up on social media, or you could email us AmericanJewPodcast@gmail.com.
Well, before we wrap today, let's lighten it up a little bit. Let's talk about food a little bit today. We haven't talked
about food.
We barely talked about food today. I feel like
okay.
it's a Jewish podcast.
What do you want to talk about?
We talk a lot about food. What have you had?
I went to Peter Pan donut shop earlier. My favorite in the city. I love it. I got a black and white cookie.
Yeah.
Big fan. I don't know. Is it Jewish, the black and white cookie? Because I feel like I had it growing up. I don't know what its Jewish roots are, but I feel like it's kind of a Jewish cookie.
I mean, Seinfeld kind of branded it as a Jew. Once it was on Seinfeld and he talked about the cookie, I feel like we wherever it came from, it's ours now.
I just know, when I was growing up on Shabbat, my mom would always get some black and white cookies.
I feel like it's an Italian cookie. I feel like that's Italian.
Is it Italian?
I don't know. I feel like the frosting is the same as some of those Italian cookies. I don't know. I could be wrong. I had some babka. I went to Bread's Bakery.
Okay, they have very good babka there.
I think it's the best babka in the city. Bread's.
Okay.
It's Israeli.
Oh, okay. Well,
I mean, that's not why.
Sorry, I know. I'm so just I hear it Israeli. I'm like, what is it? It's the most entitled babka in the world.
You're just upset because we're taping this after dark, so they're closed already.
Oh my goodness, I can't get any babka. But I don't know. I guess we'll do some more research about the black and white cookie and see if it has Jewish roots that we could talk about in the next episode. I had dinner the other night with a friend of mine, my friend Martin from Germany. Hey, look at this coming together.
Yeah, I had dinner with a German, and he tried farting on me, but and telling me that it was just from Brooklyn. I'm like, no, we know who gassed me.
Okay, wow.
It was the German.
Yeah, I don't know if that joke was better the second time, Jordan.
Yeah, you know what?
Sorry.
That's true. I might have to. Who knows if I send that one to Martin or not? But yeah, it was nice to have my friend Martin. He's a friend to the Jews.
Okay, hey, we need as many friends as we can, especially these days. Trump's running again. Anti-Semitism is going on. It's just a never-ending thing for us. But we will survive like we always have.
We'll be back next week after Thanksgiving.
I don't know. I don't think we're going to record next week.
Oh no, yeah, no recording next week.
No recording next week, but we'll be back in 2 weeks. No, I'm going to Maryland next week to perform in Maryland Friday and Saturday. So
wow, you're gonna be down there on Thanksgiving, or
I'm going to leave on Friday.
Very exciting.
So I'll leave on Friday and come back probably Sunday. Going to perform at Magoobies.
Nice.
Yeah, so that should be fun.
Well, I hope you have a happy Thanksgiving.
Thanks. We hope everybody out there has a happy Thanksgiving. If you want to take some of that stuffing, try to make a matzo ball out of it, go for it.
We're very thankful for all of you and all of the feedback we've gotten on the podcast so far. We're so happy that we brought it back to you.
Yeah, check us out on social media at American Jew Podcast. Of course, you can check me out on all social media platforms at Jonathan Randall, and you can check out my other podcast, How You Like Me Now.
You can follow me on Instagram at BeatnikNudnik, oh boy, and you can always follow my other podcast, Where's the Grief, which is at Where's the Grief, and it's about grief. And I don't know. I think we did pretty good today. This was not too much kvetching.
Okay. I mean, I guess we were kvetching about anti-Semitism and people crying wolf about anti-Semitism.
But your back is feeling better.
My back is feeling better. It's not 100%, but I'm not complaining about it as much.
Very good. Good to have a load off your back.
That's what she said.
All right. That was great.
good flow. You were definitely a lot more on today than I thought.